one of the things that we did in the parish to sort of shake everybody up a little bit and to get everybody thinking along the terms of genuine revival was a procession through the streets of Greenlawn around the parish. Now, this had not been done in over 20 some odd years. I think Father Greg, when he was here, did it one time. Connected with the Feast of Corpus Christi, we have this tradition of processions. What is normally processed? What do we normally process with when we're doing a Corpus Christi? Well, with the body of Christ, with the elements of the Eucharist, sometimes in a monstrance, sometimes in a ciborium. Those are the sacred vessels that hold the Eucharist. The monstrance is meant so that the Eucharist will be visible to people. But we came around through some of the quieter streets near the church so that people would get the idea that religion is meant to be lived in daily life and celebrated and openly, hopefully, with freedom, by its adherents, and that Catholicism is a joyful, triumphant, not in the sense of subjugating anybody else, but conquering over sin and death. It's a conquering faith. It's a conquering church. We're in it to win it. We're not in it just to survive. We're in it to win it, even if it looks like the odds are against us. So we had this special little procession, and I want to just say I was so proud of our people that about 90 people showed up for this, so to speak, experimental one that we had this time. Next year, I basically we're going to double that number. People will hear about it, and people will come out in a special way for it. But the idea of it, of course, is not simply that we celebrate that with externals, but that it touches our hearts. There's something about a gang coming down the street that can't be beat. It can't be beat. In other words, it's faith not locked up in a church, not locked up in a building, but out where people actually live and are and function in their daily lives. Now, this Feast of Corpus Christi is a very, very Catholic feast. It was set up in the Middle Ages to help the people get in touch with the fact that there had been certain very special Eucharistic miracles that had occurred. And they seem to occur in the oddest places, in the oddest ways, but that the Lord manages to use them to bring home the reality of the Eucharist to his people. So the one that really stems back for us to Corpus Christi is that miracle at Orvieto, a little town in Umbria. Umbria is the province in Italy, right next to Tuscany, where Florence is a very beautiful place. Assisi is there. It's not the biggest city, it's not the biggest town in Umbria, but Francis of Assisi came from Assisi, which is the heart of Umbria. This also was around the same time, in the 13th century, around that time that Francis himself lived. It was a time of great faith. There used to be a very triumphalistic book about the history of the church called The 13th, the Greatest of Centuries. It was interesting in some ways. It assembled true facts. It wasn't all made up out of whole cloth, but a little triumphalistic. Well, the great cathedrals were going up, the great Gothic cathedrals going, the religious orders like the Franciscans and the Dominicans, they were really movements of the spirit in the church, and they were being founded and so forth. The Crusades were on, and of course people felt that they weren't focusing on the negative aspects. They were focusing on the fact that they were going to help pilgrims get to the Holy Land without being subjected to the interventions of non-believers and so forth, or actually robbed or sometimes even killed along the way. So they were trying to straighten that situation out, and many other things that were represented by the efforts of that time. St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure were alive. It was, there were some of the saints were kings and queens. King Louis IX, Elizabeth of Hungary. They were actually some of the crowned heads of Europe got canonized. So it was an age of faith and building and so forth. And so anyway, the idea is at this point in time, there's a Bohemian priest, and he's on his way to Rome, to the Vatican or the papal offices, whatever, at that time, to do some business for his bishop there. And of course, at the very moment he's saying Mass in a little country chapel, he severely doubts, and he can't shake it from his mind, that anything really happens at the consecration. He can't shake that, just that it remains, the bread remains the bread and the wine remains the wine, and why should we be thinking of it? And he was plagued with doubt. And while he was struggling to continue with the Mass, the host miraculously bled on the altar cloths, with a fairly good quantity of blood too, apparently. The altar cloths were fairly large, and they were stained pretty thoroughly, by the outflow of the blood. Well, the priest reported all of this to the local bishop, which that was in Orvieto, a few miles out of town from this little country chapel. He quickly took possession of the relic, approved of its authenticity, and they built a great reliquary. So even now, the little town of Orvieto celebrates with a great feast, and that altar cloth is taken through the streets. There were several other miracles like that, and so the Pope was saying, obviously the Lord has got us in a direction here. So he called upon Thomas Aquinas to write the Mass and the office. the offices, the liturgy, the hours, to compose a mass and compose and he wrote some of the beautiful texts that are part of those two worship items that we have. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of the background of Corpus Christi. Now, what's going to happen with this Eucharistic revival? Well, we really obviously we were on so many different levels. We want to work with people who have a sense that revival is needed. We have to start someplace, and we have to start with people we have some common ground. But the hope is eventually that people will see there's some vibrancy going on in the church. People are meeting, people are praying, people are talking about the Lord in an enthusiastic way and how he's changing their lives, and they'll want a piece of it. They'll want a piece of it. So they're coming up with various plans so that when people start, so to speak, knocking on our doors, we'll be ready for them. And of course, the new thing about this is they want to use all the social media stuff. Now, and this presents a challenge to some of us, like myself, who are kind of bringing up the rear end, so to speak, of this digital age, and not really using it as much as we could. But we're going to try to do our very best with it, get people who are savvy about it to help us out, so that really and truly we can take the modern media also, not just simply the standard ones, the preaching or the small group, but rather a way that everybody can get involved with how much they know or how much they don't know about high-tech stuff. So anyway, please stay tuned because a lot's coming out. It's every single day it seems something else is coming out from the diocesan office, and we want to do our best. They're planning some pilgrimages to upstate New York and a big one to Minneapolis or the area of Minnesota for a national what should we call it? A national pilgrimage, so that the national revival. So let's see what the Lord can do. There have been revivals in the Catholic Church before. For example, the charismatic renewal was a revival in the 70s and in the 80s. The Franciscan movement in the 13th century, that was there too. Let's see also, well, the very beginnings of the church are filled with the excitement and emotion of God's working together. But in any way, it looks like the Lord's got something big up his sleeve. He's inspiring people. People are getting it. People are moving. Things are happening. Stay with it and trust that God has not abandoned his people, but is bringing them to a new level of joy and peace, even as they make their journey through this difficult world. See you soon, everybody. God bless you now.